Hi everyone, Tim Clapham here for FX PhD, and this is week 5 of the c4d215 course. And this week we're going to look at how we can drive animation using effectors. So a few things to get through, so let's just get started. You should have a scene included in the download which is called Cube Start, c4d215 Cube Start. When you open it, it will look something like this. So what we've got here is we've got a cube that has basically been disconnected. You can select, you make the cube editable, choose mesh, commands, disconnect, open up the dialog, and you can uncheck preserve groups. It doesn't really matter on this example, and that makes each side of the cube a separate object. I've then placed them into a hierarchy. So what we need to do now is we need to just fix the axis, and I want to make this so the box kind of folds itself up. Switch to edge mode, and let's select all of the sides of the cube like so, and now we can just select these edges like so. If we bring up axis center, which you can find here, mesh axis center, what we want to do is we want to adjust the axis so it's on the selected edge. We also want to enable alignment, and let's set X to align along the selected edge as well. And if we click execute, all of the axes move there. Now we should be able to grab our cubes, and hopefully, there we go, and you can see that and unfolds. Let's grab this top piece, and we need to select this edge, perform the same with axis center. Now we should be able to select all of these and unfold. So there we have our box unfolding. Okay, so let's animate this. We're going to keep this really simple. This is really just a device to show the principles. Let's come to frame 25. Select all of these objects except the very parent. Let's add a key for our rotation pitch. Let's come back to frame 0 and let's set this to 90. And add a key, and now we have the box folding. And actually, let's call this cube top. If we come down to our cube top, I want to set this to actually be 180 rather than 90. Okay, and the next thing I want to do is scale them. I don't want to scale them on X, I just want to scale them on Z and Y. In fact, we only really need to scale them on Y. So on frame 25, let's add a key for our Y scale. Let's come back to frame 0 and let's set that to be 0. Okay, like so. Now, okay, so the cube top, we're going to need to scale this on Z. So let's come to 25, add a key here, come back, set that to 0, like so. And then finally, let's select the very top cube. Let's come to frame 25, add a key for scale, come back to frame 0, let's set all of those to 0 and add a key. Okay, so now we have this box scaling up and unfolding. I'm going to offset these animations slightly. Let's just set that to say 10. And then if we open this up so we can find our cube top, and let's offset that another 10. There we go. So it's not exactly the most groundbreaking piece of animation. Okay, now the only thing with this is it looks as though the cube side main object, the axis is right in the middle there. And what I really want to do is set this to all points so that the axis is down there. That's better. Okay, so it's scaling up from the bottom, so it's sitting on the ground. Cool, so there's the animation. Let's save the project. With that cube selected, if we come up, hold down Alt, and let's drop that into a cloner, and let's say, take this cloner, switch to the Object tab, and let's set that to be a grid array, and we'll set that to be 5, 1, 5. Okay, and now you can see we have this array of our cubes. Let's set this to 100 by 100. If we scrub through, you can see that the animation all happens simultaneously on all of our clones, and what we really want to do is we want to control how that animation starts, and we can do that by using effectors. If we come to the cloner and switch to the transform tab, at the bottom here we have this time parameter and we have an animation mode. So if we set that animation mode to fixed, now what happens when we scrub through is we don't get any of the animation that are on our objects. But what we can do is we can come up, let's just add in a plane effector, and let's switch to the parameter tab and set that position to be disabled. And at the bottom here we have time offset. If we scrub this value, you can see that now what happens is we're controlling that animation with our effector. So if we come down to the timeline, have a look, we can see that the animation ends around 45. So if we set this to be 45, we should be at the end of our keyframed animation. With that effector, switch to the fall off tab and let's set the fall off to be linear and set that to be, say, well, plus Z is fine. And if we set the fall off to be 100%, let's just rotate this round. And now if we grab this and pull it through, you can see we're actually driving that animation with the effector. So we're essentially wiping on those boxes and they're all folding on. So this is a really simple example of animation, but imagine if you create something a little bit more complex. You know, you can control that animation with your effector. If we just disable this for a second, I just want to show you an alternative. Come up and add in our good old random effector, switch to the parameter tab and uncheck position, and here we can use the time offset. And you can see if we drag this value, it randomly animates the boxes on and off, which is pretty cool. Okay, come back to the plane effector. In fact, let's disable that for a second. Come up and let's add in just a simple text spline. I'm just going to type on here FX for FXPHD. Set this to be XZ. Let's just choose a font. Okay, good old Helvetica, that will do. And let's go for Helvetica Black. So we have a nice heavy font. Okay, and let's just make that a fair bit bigger. Okay, that will probably do. Set that to say 850. And now hold down Alt and drop that into a loft, so we've got some geometry there. Next, I'm going to add in a matrix object. Now, you could do this directly with the cloner, but it's probably quicker if you do it with the matrix object because it doesn't have any of that geometry to worry about. It's just worrying about the matrices. Set that to grid array. Let's set that to be 1 on Y, like so. And if we come to our top view, and just pull this up somewhere around here. I'm just going to do this fairly haphazardly because we just want to get through it fairly quickly, and let's just increase the number of these. So we're going to have quite a few, something like so. If we grab this text spline and let's make an instance of that, and then let's drop that into an extrude, and we'll set the extrude to extrude along, say 250, and let's just drag that down. Okay, and then select our matrix object and choose an effector and add in a volume effector. Now the volume that we want to use is the extrude, but I don't think that will work. If we drop that in, and let's just say adjust the position, you can see that we are getting a result, but it's not really affecting all of our clones, only affecting some at the certain points where the vertices are. Okay, if we add a connect object, we should be able to get around it like that. So let's drop that extrude into there. There's our connect. Let's hide that. Let's select our volume and drop the connect into there. Now if we enable position, there you go. So that's now working. We can hide this loft as well. And let's put all this geometry at the top. Let's put our effectors at the bottom. It's nice to try and get your objects in the order of execution. Let's drop that plane effector down here. So this volume, we don't want to actually affect position. What we want to do is we want to affect visibility. And there we go. So now we have FX made out of all of our clones. We can hide the matrix object. We can select our cloner and we can set that to be object, and we can then clone onto that matrix object. And you can see it becomes very slow, which is why I built the scene with the matrix object in the first place. Let's just enable render instances. And there we go. Now the thing with render instances is that they will all animate simultaneously. However, of course, they're not going to animate at the moment because the transform tab animation mode is set to fixed. If we set that to play, now we should be able to scrub through. There we go, and see the animation. But of course, if we want to control that with an effector, then we need to set that to fixed. So now we can drop on our plane effector again, and as we drag that through, doesn't seem to be working. And the reason it's not working, Tim, wake up, is because we have our cloner set to render instances, and unfortunately we can't use render instances with this trick, which does mean it's a bit of a heavy load on your processor. You can see how long it's taking to redraw here. There aren't even that many objects. Okay, so we have a result. You can see it's pretty much what we expected. We might want to increase the fall off here. But if you're working with a scene like this, obviously it's becoming really hard to work with already, and it's still fairly simple. So this is why you may want to just disable that cloner for now and work with the matrix object. And you're not necessarily going to see the effect, but we can see where our FX is, and we can come down here, say, let's add a key for our X and Z position. Let's come to frame 124. In fact, let's make that fall off a bit bigger. Let's just pull that through like so. Add another key. And there we go. And now we've just got a simple wipe. And if we hide that matrix, enable our cloner. Before we look at that render, you're probably thinking, well, why isn't the scale from the first object working? Because we shouldn't be able to see anything at the beginning of the animation. That was the whole point of scaling up the parent object. That was just a slight mistake on my part, because what we really need to do is drop this into a null, and then that will work. If we just set this cloner to be linear, say. So now let's set that to play. Okay, so there we go. If we grab this parent and just hold down Alt and drop that into a null, you can see that then it works. I'm not sure why it's like that they have to be in a group, or the very parent object, the animation isn't considered, but that's how we do it. So now that should be working as we want it to. Let's just unhide that matrix for a second so we can see everything. Okay, and there we go. So now if we hide the matrix, set our cloner back to the object mode, cloning on our matrix. We also need to set our cloner back to be fixed and enable this plane effector that we're wiping through. And now we should be good to just hit render. And there we go. And as you can see, as we drag through, all of the boxes animate on. So we're not using the effector to kind of scale them up, we're actually using the keyframed animation. And if you added a little bit of weight with the random effector before the plane effector, that would probably be a little bit more interesting. And of course that will work with any keyframed animation. And if you're using things such as simulation that don't, or expressions that don't generate keys, it's not going to work. So if you want to use an expression, then you're going to need to use the functions here and choose bake objects. I haven't got them selected, so it's not active. And you can then bake those expressions into keyframes, and once you've got the keyframes, you can then use the same principle. Okay, so let's just save this. We can close it and move on to the next section. I've opened up another scene, and this should have been included with your download as well, and this is called Box Opener. And you can see in here we've got a spline that I've created, and we've got this box with a separate lid, and you can see the axis for the lid is here, so we can essentially open this, and inside we have a pyramid here, and we can animate this moving up and down. So we're just going to create another simple animation here, so let's just set that lid back to 0. On frame 0 I'm going to add a key for the lid pitch rotation. Let's come to, say, frame 6. I want this to be quite quick, and let's scrub this back to about, say, -160. Let's add another key. Let's come forward to, say, frame 9. I just want to select this rotation so I can see it. Here I'm going to set the rotation to be, say, -155. Add another key, and let's just come forward another 3 or 4 frames and set that to be -165. And add a key. And if we just rewind, let's grab this curve and just curve that down. Something like so. And now we should have, okay, a bit of a dodgy little animation. You could certainly do a better job than me of that. Rewind to 0. Let's grab this pyramid and let's set a key for Y position. Let's come to, say, frame 8. And set this to, say, 275, so the pyramid pops out. And let's add a key here. Let's select that position track, press H to frame it. If we grab this first key and then just let's bring that curve up. So now when we rewind and press play, the lid is quite comical the way I've animated that. Not quite the result I was after, but this will still work. Okay, so now we've got these. Let's select the base, hold down Alt and drop this into a cloner. On the cloner, switch to the Object tab, and rather than using the linear mode, what we're going to do here is we're going to set this to be Object, and I'm going to grab this line and just drop that in. Okay, so now we have a whole bunch of these animating, and you can see that they're actually at the wrong axes, and we've probably got far too many. Let's set that count to be 5. Switch to the Transform tab and let's set the heading to be -90. Okay, so now that's correct. So now we have all these boxes opening. And again, these could be any keyframed animation. But what we're going to do here is we're going to set the animation mode to be fixed. And we're going to drive this with an effector as well in a slightly different way. But before we do that, let's switch back to the Object tab. Make sure you're on frame 0. Let's add a key for the offset. Let's go to the end, which is frame 50, and let's set that offset to be, say, 20%. Okay, and add another key. So now you can see our objects are moving. And I'm just going to select that cloner. Let's press H. In fact, let's open that select offset and press H. And I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to pull that across. Grab this and pull this across. Like so. Okay. Select the cloner. Under the transform tab, we set our animation mode to fixed as we did before. And let's come up and add in a plane effector. Uncheck position. Let's come down to our time offset. Now we need to just switch over to key mode so we can see whereabouts our animation ends. So it's around here, which is frame 12. So we set our plane effector time offset to be 12. Switch to the fall off tab. Let's set the shape to be box. Okay, and let's just pull that up. And you can see now that we're driving that animation with the effector. And I'm just going to scale this up. I'm not sure how big that needs to be. Let's just scrub through. And you can see that as they leave the fall off, the animation reverses. So now if we just hide that box, press play, we essentially create a kind of conveyor belt where each object opens when it's in that fall off. Again, driving the keyframes with that effector. Very similar to the last, but a totally different kind of application. Of course, these can be anything that you like, something a bit more interesting. Okay, I've closed that down and started with another scene, and I'm going to show you another way that we can drive our animation with effectors, a different approach this time. First of all, what we're going to do is we're going to make a sausage. So to do that, we're going to add in a capsule, and let's set that to be +X, and I want the radius to be about 25, height of 200, and we'll leave the rest of the values as they are. Hold down the capsule and let's press Shift and add a bend deformer. And let's set that bend deformer to have a strength of 40. Now if you're using release 15, you've got this nice fit to parent option. So if we set that to 40, you can see that the bend is obviously incorrect for the result that we want. If we grab our bend, switch to our rotate tool, whoops, and rotate that around, and then let's rotate it like so. Okay, that's how we want it. And now if we hit fit to parent, you can see that we get a nice curve there. Let's select the capsule, hold down Alt and add in a null, and let's just call this sausage. Switch to our front view, we can grab that capsule and now we can just rotate that around. Okay, and let's just position it somewhere like so. And let's just grab this sausage, control drag to create a duplicate, and let's call this sausage split. Hide our first sausage. And for this we're going to make it as if the sausage has been cut in half. And we're going to use an effector to drive the animation to switch between the two states. So we see the sausage and then we chop it in half. But we won't actually keyframe the sausage at all. We'll use the effectors to control that. So I'm going to take this sausage that we have here, select the capsule, and let's hold down Alt and come up and add in a bool. And it's set to A subtract B. So what I want to do is just hold down Shift and add in a cube, but put the capsule above that. And if we grab this cube and pull it across, somewhere like so, let's call this sausage split 01. Control drag, call this sausage split 02. And on this one, we're just going to grab the cube and pull that across the other way, like so. If we take both of these, let's add in a null. We'll call this sausage split. And we take both of these and drop them into here, like so. And let's just grab each of these and, in fact, let's hide our bend deformers. Okay, so we want to just make it as if it's split open, and we can just maybe pull that apart slightly, like so. Okay, there we go, there's our sausage split. Not going to win any awards for the modelling on this. Okay, good idea to save the project at this point, and then what we're going to do is we're going to open the Illustrator file that was included in your download called class01. I'm just going to open that into a new scene first of all. And you can see what I've done here is just create some simple paths in Illustrator of a cleaver shape. And what I'm going to do is open this up. Here we have the handle, here we have the blade. Let's call this blade. And I'm going to just drop that into a loft so we have some geometry there. Okay, and we can probably set this parameter to be a bit lower so we get a smoother curve. Let's take this part here, which is essentially the handle, and I just want to control drag to create a duplicate of this. Switch to points mode, and let's just frame that object, and let's select all those points, right click and choose create outline, and then just drag like so to create a slightly smaller version of the handle, and then hit delete to delete the other points. And you can see if we come to our front view that we have a little bit of a problem here, but we can easily fix that. We can just drag that across, grab this, pull it down. And now if we take our path or our handle, drop that into a loft, grab our handle too, drop that in. Let's have a look at the result that we have here. If we grab our handle too and pull that out, and there we go, and you can see the result. You can see that something's not quite right. And the only reason for that is that the two splines are traveling in opposite directions. So if we select one of these and right click and just choose reverse sequence, and then we should be good. And there we go. Okay, I'm not really going to worry about the quality of this, but let's just drop that into a symmetry, set this to be XY, and there we have our handle. So now we have a nice cleaver. I'm just going to give these a bit of colour, something like so. Nice brown handle, lovely. Okay. So there we have our cleaver group. Switch back to our front view. Let's switch to model mode and axis mode and grab this, and let's just put that over there on the handle, something like so. And that just means that we can then chop. Hiya! Okay. Just going to take that out of here, come back to my other scene, let's paste that in. Let's unhide our sausage. Okay, so the cleaver is obviously a little bit big. First of all, we need to rotate this around 90 degrees, and we can then scale this down. Let's place that over here. And there we go. Let's just pull that up slightly. Okay, so now we're ready to create our animation. Okay, with the cleaver selected, switch to the coordinates tab, and we should be able to animate the, it's the bank. Hiya! And I'm going to just set that to be, say, 20. Let's come along around, say, let's say frame 50, that may be a bit sooner, 40, doesn't really matter. Add a key here. Let's go to frame 50, and let's set that to be maybe 5. A little bit lower. In fact, even 0, why not? And there we go. So now we have a very simple chop. Let's select the cleaver in the timeline, press Control, hit space to bring up the F curve for that, and then press H to frame that. And we can, let's grab the last key and just bring it up like so. So there's a bit more of a chopping action, like so. Okay, next thing we want to do is come up to the MoGraph menu, add in a clone, and we call this cloner sausages. I do love sausages. Let's grab these two sausage objects and drop them into our cloner. Select the cloner, switch to the Object tab, and we only want to have one object, and we want to set our Y to 0. Not that it matters because we only have one. And the important part here is that we want to change this clones parameter from iterate, and we want to set that to sort. And what sort mode means is that it allows you to use an effector to control which clone is visible. And because we don't have any effectors in here, it's showing us the top clone. If we swap these around, it's showing us the split clone, the split sausage now. If I just hide that for a sec, there you go, so you can see what I mean. So there's our sausage. Let's just switch that back. So select the cloner, come to the MoGraph menu, and let's add in a plane effector, switch to the parameter tab, and we just want to uncheck position because we're not interested in transforming. What we're interested in doing is using this modify clone parameter. And if we drag this up, you can see that once we get past 50%, because we have two objects, it then switches to the second object. So if we had 3, then it would switch between them at 33 and 66, etc. So let's just set that to 100. Let's unhide our cleaver. Now this plane effector, what we want to do here is just add some fall off. So switch to the fall off tab, and the type of fall off that we're going to use for this is just simply linear, and we set that to -y. So now if we grab this and pull it up and down, you can see that at that point it is now switching between those two clones. So all we need to do is put this, kind of line it up with the blade of our cleaver. And then if we drop that plane effector into the cleaver, as we come back, it's obviously going to lift up. Let's select that plane effector and uncheck visible so we can't see our fall off at all. And now when we press play, as we chop the sausage, we get the illusion that it's actually cutting it. So again, we're using that effector to drive, not really animation as such, but it's driving which sausage is visible. But we can actually take this even further. Let's add in a plane object. I just want to make sure that we're below our sausage, which we are almost. Let's just put that down. In fact, we'll leave that at 0 and we'll just grab our clone and we'll just move that up 1 or 2 units. Select that cloner. Let's right click on here and choose simulation tags and add a rigid body tag. Now if we press play, you can see our sausage just drops down. So we need to select our plane and add a collider body. Now the sausage just drops. And you can see that it's starting to look actually okay, even with just such a simple object and a simple animation. And the sausage does start to roll, and maybe you don't want that dynamic effect to happen until it chops. And the other thing as well is that you'll notice, although it's not obvious, let's hide that cleaver, both split pieces of sausage roll the same, and that's because our cloner, under the dynamics tag, under the collision tab, individual elements, is currently set to off. And what we really want to do here is set this to perhaps top level, but this is going to be the first top level here, so really we want to probably go to the second level. Now let's rewind, press play, and there you go, and they're actually now rolling in different directions. So the two pieces are becoming independent dynamic objects. Let's just add our cleaver back in, and there we go. So quite comical, but you can imagine that that could be used in many, many different ways. This is just a simple example to show you the technique of using that effector to drive which clone is visible. Now, if we only wanted the dynamics to be triggered at the point that the knife cuts through, we can use the same effector that we have here to actually switch on our dynamics, and it's fairly simple to set up. Okay, so let's just grab our plane that we have here and let's just add a tiny bit of rotation to this, only like 4 or 5 degrees. Let's just press play now. And you can see that that sausage is going to roll away, and the problem here is that as it rolls, when it jumps to the new clone, it's back in its original position, so it kind of breaks the illusion. So what we want to do is we don't really want this to become dynamic until it cuts, and then we can have the two pieces roll down. So I'm going to select the cloner, right click, choose Cinema 4D tags, add an Espresso tag. I want that Espresso to be evaluated before that Dynamics tag really, so I want it to be on this side. Now there are a few ways of doing this. The way that I'm going to show you is just going to be by changing the weight of the clones with the effector. If we just create a new scene, let's just add in a cloner object. Let's just set that to be a grid array. And let's add in a cube. And there we go. So we've got a whole bunch of cubes. If we select the cloner, come to the transform tab, we can set the display here to display the weight. Okay, and you can see there that they are all red. Okay, it doesn't seem to be displaying correctly. We've got some orange ones there, which actually isn't correct. But if we add in an effector, like a plane effector, and we select the parameter and uncheck position, we have a weight transform here. We can use this, and you can see as I adjust it, the colors change from red to yellow. And the weight determines how much of an effect any subsequent effectors have on it. So if we use a random effector, for instance, and we set that for a weight transform, you can see that the weight varies over all of them. So the next effector will affect some of them more than others, and it's a really great way to add a bit more randomness to your animations. We're going to use it slightly differently in this scene here. We're going to change the weight of our sausage when the cleaver hits it. So what we want to do with the plane effector is we just set our weight transform to be 100. So that means that as it comes down and chops, that plane effector is going to adjust the weight. And we can check that with our Espresso. So let's just grab our cloner and drop it in here. We need to output the object, and then we're going to add in new node, motion graphics, and a data node. Now the object that we want to grab our data from is of course our cloner, so we link the object here to the object in our data node, and then we want to output the weight. Okay, if we right click, choose new node, Espresso general, and add a result node in, let's just grab that and drop that into here. Okay, and you can see that the weight is 0, and as it chops through, the weight increases. Now it doesn't quite reach 1 because of the fall off. I haven't been very careful about how I've set up my fall off, and maybe it needs to either be another effector that passes all the way through, or we just need to adjust that so it comes higher, but that's fine. We can see that it goes up to 0.861, and as we come back you can see that it's then at 0, so we can use this value to trigger our dynamics. So if we just add a new node, Espresso logic compare, and we want to compare that weight value with a number that we say, and we want to say, okay, if that weight is greater than, and we know that that goes up to 0.861, so let's say if that weight is greater than 0.5, then output a positive value. We can then grab our dynamics tag and just drop that in, and if we come down here, dynamics enabled, we've got an enable option, and we can use this compare, link it with that enabled, and if we drag back now, you can see that that disables the tag, and as we come along here, it then enables it. So we're basically switching that tag on with the weight of our clones. So now when we press play, you can see the sausage doesn't move, it doesn't roll. It's only when we drop our cleaver down, it chops through. At that point, the sausage becomes dynamic and rolls off. For some reason, that side isn't rolling, but it's essentially working. And there you go. So we're using that effector to not only drive the clone that's visible, but we're also using it to drive our dynamics tag and switch that on at a certain point. So there we go. I've shown you 3 different ways that we can use effectors to help drive our animations. It helps to leave everything kind of procedural. If you're working with multiple objects, it means you can animate one and have them all animate at different times. So you could use it maybe for growing a forest of trees. You could use the conveyor belt option for, you know, like a factory of some kind. And of course you could use the sausage for all of those times when you need to animate sausages cut in half. So I hope you enjoyed this class, and it's given you some ideas for some of your own projects. If you've got any questions, or if you've got any examples of how you may have used these techniques, then please post them in the forums. Other than that, it's a gap week next week, and I'll see you the following week when we come back for another new class. And for the final 5 classes of this term, we're going to be looking at more project-based classes. So there's only 2 more projects that we're going to do, and the next one is all about sound, and we're going to look at how we can use sound, and we're going to create a logo reveal from beginning to end. So we're going to kind of come up with a concept, work out some methods of driving our animation with sound, and using that to reveal our logo. So it should be a lot of fun. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.